Thanks to our great architect Jennifer McGrory, who was in charge of the renovation project at the library. It's really an honor to have Jennifer here in this talk. Jennifer is an architect and also an educator, a teacher. He teaches architecture and architectural history in Boston, so it's just great to have her today. I told Jennifer that you are all involved in a soft architecture project, so at the end we're going to have like about 5 minutes. Don't be shy, ask any questions that you have about your structure, your design, your plans, discuss them with Jennifer, and hopefully you'll receive some good feedback from her. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
I'm going to put on a timer so you might hear my phone go off in about 20 minutes, just so we definitely have time. We want to keep this brief. So, as you mentioned, first of all, thanks. It's Friday afternoon. I totally get it. You're all, it's probably the end of a long week for everyone. So, I'm going to talk for a little while, but I'd love for this to become a discussion at the end. As Pamela mentioned, I'm Jennifer McGrory. I am a registered architect in Massachusetts, but I'm also a LEED accredited professional, which means that I have studied sustainability and design practices specifically related to architecture. And I had the great fortune of managing the library project that I'm sure you've all been in, the renovation. That was for about the last 4.5 years. And it was really exciting, and I hope that the project has been a great change to the campus for all of you. So, starting off on a pretty sort of negative start to this, about why would we design responsibly? That's what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to talk about all issues of design responsibility, but starting off on the why. There's a lot of comments on here that come from, there are a lot of facts. You probably know most of them already. You know, we use 26% of the world's energy. All of these things, these 9 points are all things that you understand within your home use, or perhaps within appliances and things that you have in your house. Things you understanding the type of use that you do. This is typical American use. You spend 10% of your electricity bill on lighting, and that you have how much your washing machine uses, and that this number 8 is a great one. 90% of the energy used by traditional bulbs is wasted in just off-putting heat. So you spend 10% of your electricity bill on lighting, and you're really 90% of that 10% is wasted money. But then what you may not fully understand, and I don't think today you'll get a grasp of fully, but this is issues in commercial and industrial facilities, and that's what, as an architect, things that I have been directly involved in, and these numbers get huge and the facts get very scary. This is about some of the things I find most interesting in here are about that the portion of energy efficiency in buildings, buildings used inefficiently or unnecessarily is 30%, and the amount of money that would be saved in energy efficiency by improving it just 10% would be $20 billion. This is issues about the United States. And that you could, if you improved energy efficiency by 10%, it would be the equivalent of 30 million vehicles, which is about the equivalent of vehicles in Illinois, New York, Ohio, and Texas combined. So there's a huge benefit to this. These things are telling you about what we do in the scale as Americans. And then now thinking even bigger, the global facts, especially related to the United States. A BTU is a measure of energy. You may have heard it. It's something that you might see on an electric bill, or you might have learned in other classes, physics or something like that. But that's a metric that we measure energy on. And our contribution to global greenhouse gas initiatives in the U.S. is 20%, but we are 5% of the population of the world. So these are some numbers that are a little bit scary, and hopefully they should be scary. They have a huge impact. And I think that one of these facts and figures about the 70s through 2004, you've been studying post-industrial cities, and usually we think about industrial cities, we're talking about a lot of construction that you might have been seeing in the late 60s and 70s. And your campus, for example, landed on the map at the late 60s. and in the early 70s. So the big point, the big takeaway from all of this is that the built environment must address energy consumption and waste. That's just it's a no-brainer right now. That's where we are, and that's a big part of this. And that's a very technical issue, and that probably sounds like an engineering issue and maybe not so much about a design or an art issue, but I want to talk a little bit more about how that might fold into it. So modernist design, and modernist design I'm talking about from about the 1940s onward. It wasn't addressing energy efficiency, so there's a couple major buildings here. This is the Farnsworth House by Mies van der Rohe, and then we have the Hancock Tower in Boston, which I'm sure you all know very well, and then this building, which you know very well. These buildings were done pre-oil crisis, so the attitudes about energy use was we're going to make spaces that are beautiful, that use large expanses of glass, and in some of the cases, they were single panes of glass, losing a tremendous amount of energy. All the lighting was incandescent lighting because, especially in concrete buildings, it really brought out the magic and the beauty of that, but it was highly inefficient, so you're losing your heat, losing your energy, and the way that they addressed that was, we'll just heat it more, we'll just cool it more, we'll just pump more energy into it. That's really the solution of these modernist architects, especially in the late 60s, and that's an attitude that might have worked well when oil was cheap. And as you probably all know, in the late 70s we had the energy crisis. None of you were probably alive for it, but it changed the attitudes about things, and buildings like these became a real problem and had to be addressed. So today's reality is very different. Part of the big reason today's reality is different is that we have been educated. So some of the reason we've been educated is because we're learning the effects of it, we're seeing the effects of it, and I know that you guys have talked about that, and it's just a huge issue. And I heard today on the radio driving down here that teams of climate scientists have now agreed that humans are the major causal factor for environmental changes. I didn't know that was a new fact, but that's how they announced on the radio. All of this education has in turn moved to governmental initiatives or nonprofit initiatives, and so there's things on the top of this that the U.S. Green Building Council, Massachusetts program Leading by Example, and the Boston Green Building Program, or the Mass Department of Energy, Green Communities programs. These are all things that would possibly be writing laws or building codes that would affect the architectural design. And so Massachusetts Leading by Example program is what is governing what's happening on your campus. That happens to be, it's called Executive Order 484, signed by Deval Patrick. And these are its targets for greenhouse gas reductions, energy reductions, and so on and so forth. These issues all talk about energy consumption. They really don't speak to design. They don't speak to the human aspect of making a space better. They talk in a black and white, metric-based system, generally about energy reduction, and then other features that you can directly relate and be accountable to. And those often, again, sound like engineering terms and specific metrics that don't sound like they might have a lot to do with design. Successful projects where you can weave design into something and I think really elevate the process, as well as doing something that is green, something that's sustainable, something that meets all of those characteristics that we just talked about, meeting the laws and the criteria, and then going beyond. That's absolutely possible. And I think that that's where, for me, I get excited. This is where the game changes and you have possibilities. And this is what is inspiring to me. And I hope that in your view, this is what's inspiring. This is the Clinton Library in Little Rock, Arkansas. It is on an old brownfield site that was heavily contaminated. against a river front that was in a terrible condition. And on top of it, they cleaned up the ground, and they opened up a riverfront park, and they built a beautiful building. And President Clinton had a huge, sustainability is a huge issue for him. That he started the Clinton Climate Initiative, which has in turn grown to just a huge foundation within the United States. And this building is a LEED certified building, but it has gone beyond and really done beautiful things with its design, as well as telling us what sustainability can be. And this is the Vancouver Convention Center. I don't know if any of you have been to this building, but it's also just a great building that has taken sustainability and pushed it further. And I mention all of this because the Pattern Mapping Institute in 2012 did a study where they found that designs that integrated beauty and function had 4 times the impact of just a LEED certified building. So beyond just the engineering, just beyond doing something as what you need to do, when you apply beauty, when you apply functionality, you really can see the benefits. They've looked at different LEED Platinum buildings. So LEED Platinum, that's as good as it gets. That's really the crowning achievement of a sustainable building that you can measure through metrics. But they also looked at buildings that had been awarded. The 2 I just showed were some of those that have been highly recognized. And buildings which best fulfilled the qualities of beauty also had higher levels of performance. And I think it's wonderful. That is the gold standard that I hope we can all work towards. So here we have your campus, the Claire T. Carney Library, and some of the images of the library transformed. So some of the things that we did to the library, the new mechanical system, there's a lot of very specific, highly technical information here about that. Some of you who know about the building know about this already. These are engineering issues, and as I mentioned, we were bound by Massachusetts Executive Order 44. We're a LEED, we're a building that's seeking LEED certification. It's going through the process. So you have to tackle these issues first. We have a Massachusetts Energy Code, and this building had to be 20% better than the Massachusetts Energy Code. So these issues had to be addressed first and foremost. These are some issues that should affect you. I'm sure, having spent a lot of time on this campus, you know the problems that you have in the buildings, and so we were trying to tackle these. And then some other features, new lighting throughout. There is no more incandescent lighting anywhere in the building. We used LEDs as much as possible in fluorescence wherever else we couldn't. LED technology is changing so rapidly that even this building being built, sort of now a year, we could have done more with LEDs if we were doing it today. That's how much has changed. So some images of the lighting. Complete roof replacement. CVPA is hiding right there in the background. This is the old roof. And some images of the roof replacement. And, the big change you might have seen here is that the roof went from being a black roof to a white roof. It's a highly reflective surface. So it's helping to reflect some of the energy back out. New restrooms. We had the added task of actually adding quantities of restrooms, which is a plumbing code issue. So we were adding number of fixtures, but we had to utilize ultra-low flow fixtures, low water use, and utilizing faucets like this that you can't leave turned on. You actually have to turn on by your hands, but by standing there, so you utilize less water. This is the 4th floor of the library. You may not have been here, but this is moving all of the offices onto the interior of the space and leaving the perimeter of the building, the exterior ring of the building, open to workstations. So that's some of these photos. This is where all the people who work in the library, this is where their offices are, not the student spaces. And the student spaces we generally try to move to the exterior as well. That is an issue of daylight. We're humans. We crave daylight. We perform better in daylight. Daylight has a positive effect on us as humans in our, just vitamin D and all of these other issues, but also it has a positive effect on our attitudes. We want people to be happy. These are human effects that sustainability can benefit. We're going through a LEED certification process. And I I guess the biggest thing that's happened here, and this is a major design issue, is that there's a topic of embodied energy, which is the idea that anything that you build, even if you choose to build something new, utilizing the most recycled material or most efficient building systems, by creating something brand new, there is added cost and energy in doing that process. So if you can reuse something, if you can revitalize something or renovate something, there is a great savings to that. The LEED program recognizes this, and that's some of the benefits and points that we got towards this project. So here you see the building in use, and people enjoying the building renovated and doing, it's building. I just spoke this morning with the dean, and he told me that in the last year alone, the metrics, they calculate how many people come and go in the library. Librarians love facts and collecting of facts. That's what they do. They calculate how many people use the library, and the library is getting 2 to 3 times the use in just this last year of the number of students who were there a year ago. So here you're seeing groups of people. You might even know some of these faces. This is the Pantheon in Rome. Has anyone been to this building? Has anyone been to Rome? Been there? This is an old concrete building. We're in an old concrete building. This building has no mechanical system. It's literally open to the elements on the inside. You may have seen this building in movies and so forth. Tom Hanks had a movie that he was in recently in this. But this building, if you haven't seen it, it's my favorite building in Rome. And there's an oculus at the top, and it's just a wide open space, and rain sort of comes into the building, and you embody the perimeter of it. It's really magical space. But I bring it up because this building has been successful, and it's successful in a human way. People embody the building. They've never stopped using and loving this building. And that is a successful design, and it's also sustainably successful. This is Notre Dame Cathedral, another major building, and again, it's never stopped being used, and it's probably one of the most visited buildings in Paris, if not the world. People love this building, and it's not an old concrete building like the Pantheon, but it really speaks to humanity. But on top of it, it just speaks to the success. A design success can breed people wanting to be somewhere. And another place. So bringing this all back to your campus, this is what, if you revitalize your own campus, you can bring back a love for the campus and bring back an energy and hopefully see buildings that have just a continued length of lifespan, and that is an incredibly sustainable way to continue. So I'm going to wrap up on my last couple topics here. We've talked a little bit about sustainability in architecture, and something I was greatly involved in, but thinking bigger picture, thinking globally, I wanted to talk about the positives that design can do in a really big picture. So has anyone here been to Africa at all? Well, you may not have been to Africa, but I'm sure you're aware within Africa, there are sort of urban slums are called settlements. And so there are large collections of the buildings that you see in the background, sort of homemade buildings, and enormous populations of people live there. You've been talking a lot about downtown New Bedford and urban blight in the United States and homelessness and major problems we have here. Africa has a whole different realm of problems, and people are actively trying to solve them. This collection of buildings in the front is a sanitation system for this settlement. That is it. That is the toilet facilities. So, in the world, 2.5 billion people lack access to hygienic sanitation. Sort of bringing us down on a Friday afternoon. I apologize for that, but it's a serious, serious issue. It's the second largest cause of disease in the world. It kills 1.6 million children a year, more than HIV, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. Sanitation is critical. We have the luxury of never really having to think about it. And so this image here is in Kenya, and in Kenya, 8 million residents lack sanitation facilities. 4 million tons of fecal sludge is discharged into waterways and fields per year. These are pit latrines. They dump directly into the river behind you, and if they are not dumping directly into a river, they are cleaned periodically by hand and dumped directly into the rivers then, if they're not placed directly on a river. If pit latrines are literally full and not available, people use flying toilets, which is a colloquial term, and it means to utilize plastic bag and toss it when you're done. And that is a sanitation method in places in Africa, and it's a harsh, harsh reality. So you can understand immediately the environmental impact of this, but there's a huge social impact to this. You know, the disease being one of them, that people just can't get beyond anything in the world. People can't, they can't live, and education and so forth. This is your drinking water, this is your bathing water, this is your water to clean your clothes, and if you happen to be trying to perhaps operate some business, this is also your water source, and there's your sanitation source. It's just a terrible problem. So here we have an alternative in Kenya. This is Fresh Life toilets, FLTs. They use a low-cost model, so people build these small buildings and they fill cartridges that are collected daily, and the waste goes through a process. It gets collected by trained personnel, and they are converted to fertilizer or renewable energy. And it's the fertilizer which Kenya has an agricultural system, and they have to import fertilizer, pay excessive tariffs, and Kenya is not a wealthy country. I'm sure you recognize that. It's been in the news a lot lately. So they're creating something that their own country needs. They install them in areas where there isn't sewage system or paved roads, which makes building sewage systems even more difficult. And on top of this, they include toilet paper, sawdust, soap and water, a sanitary bin, a mirror, and a solar lantern. So all of a sudden, you start thinking about the abilities of hygiene and cleanliness, and the abilities of people to take something that we don't think about and move on with other issues in their life. And I would also add that solar lanterns and hygiene, there's less crime involved with this as well. So in Kenya, they've installed 219 of these. They have 10,000 users, 1,000 metric tons of waste is safely removed and is treated, and 409 jobs are created. They become independent contractors, and there's foundations that help donate the money, and they build out of sustainable materials and hygienic, clean materials. And I think it's a solution, a really beautifully designed solution that sustainability is woven in directly to it, and it's solving a much bigger problem. And I know you guys are talking about urban blight and how to solve those problems, which seems like, it seems almost overwhelming as a problem, but then you can think about the problems elsewhere and how overwhelming they might be elsewhere. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is a project about violence prevention through urban upgrading. This is in a township in Cape Town, South Africa, and I think it's Letitia. I'm not sure how you pronounce this, but what they've done is, this is an image of a settlement, and I've been to South Africa. Settlements are a major part of the landscape there. And so in settlements, I'm sure you've heard in the news, there's a tremendous amount of crime and violence. So all of the issues I just talked about, sanitation and so forth, those exist, but people try to set up schools and try to live in these settlements. They leave to go to work every day, but just children have no safe paths to get anywhere. There's there may or may not be schools within there to get to, but if there are schools, there's not safety. There's no light for them to safely walk home or get between places, and just playing outside is an added level that most people could not even think to do because of issues of safety. So what they've done is they've built active boxes, they call them, and they double as safe houses and community patrol bases, and they've planned along the pedestrian routes that already occurred in these places. And they have built into them, they've sort of built clear paths and then installed lighting, and by doing this, they become sort of key areas within a settlement. So this is an image of one, and so there's the ability, if anyone feels unsafe at any point in time, they can go in these, and they're open 24 hours a day. But then when you build something like this, you then have the ability to start putting things nearby. So that's the building right in the background, and right next to it is a large field for soccer, and they installed lighting. And this is it, being used in the day. School kids are traveling in between. And this building, by the way, is not a very huge, majestic building. It's really 2 stories with a sort of 3rd-story lookout. But this building is by far the tallest thing around. And so it's an outlet of safety, and it's a marker to understand and navigate your way through here. And these are small buildings that are having a huge impact. This is not going to be the Pantheon, but this building really could dramatically change a lot of lives. And having a safe place that is not controlled or owned by any one particular person, they can now build playgrounds and really change lives in a pretty dramatic way. So I started off with some pretty negative things, and I'm going to end it there, but that's a project that I think urban installations can have a dramatic effect on a person's life and on a community. And some of them are really quite simple, but they're design solutions that they've worked hard to solve problems that exist. So on that note, I just want to turn around and hear if you have any questions.
Jennifer, I have a question. So, as you know, in this class, the students are also developing projects like this, projects that I call soft architecture, places where people can enjoy themselves, places that can replace empty urban lots and vacant spaces in a post-industrial city. But because we're coming up with the quote-unquote soft architecture, we're a little worried that this kind of architecture would be temporary. What will happen to it in the long run? And how can we make sure that these temporary structures can really contribute to the life of the city in the long run?
Well, I think temporary structures are, I think we should think about them as the impetus for something bigger. And in many cases, a temporary structure calls attention to either a problem or calls attention to a potential solution. And they attract people, and they attract energy, and they attract focus, and perhaps education about something going on. And those types of things can then start to attract actual permanent development. So, as an example, this is a really big example, but there's an area of Boston that's the Seaport District, and the city decided to put a few items in that district and that neighborhood. And this is something that happens to areas that need revitalization. And Boston is an incredibly wealthy town and has fewer problems than a lot of other places. We're pretty lucky in Massachusetts in that instance, but there are still places that need this. So people go in first, and oftentimes they are related to things that are initiatives, and they put in a few items, some of them temporary, some of them permanent, and they attract more conventional development. So if you put in something in the seaport, they put in the courthouse, they put in the convention center, and they put in some other, they put in some parks. So the city or the state put in these items, and it took a lot of vision, and they were in the sea of parking lots and wasteland and decrepit buildings and real estate that didn't have a lot of value. But over time now, it's an entirely different place, and the area is covered in restaurants and commercial office spaces and housing and all different things. And by having something that is the start there and the energy and really drives attention to a problem or to an area, that can be enough. And that your temporary installation, it had a bigger impact. And I think that that's as important or as successful.
I have a kind of complicated question. If you were given this project now, like, I think as students, we have a different perspective than you would have because we're coming at this new and we don't know a lot of stuff that you would know. So if you were given this project, what would you do, I guess? Because I think we would come at it from like, we want to do very like glamorous things. We want to invent, big important buildings that would solve all the problems. But I think there are smaller things that we would think of maybe that you might have a better handle on.
Well, I think you might want to try to figure out exactly what problem you want to focus on. It's, for me, one of the issues in design, whether you're designing a building or a vacuum cleaner or whatever you want to tackle for design, you have to really be clear about what the problem is. And in architecture school, I had to do a thesis, and you're sort of left on your own to do this.
Yeah.
It's your final project, but you have to define, you spend the first portion of the project really defining your problem. And you often start off very broad, and the team of people around you really help you to focus that and understand, what is the most important issue to you to solve. If you can't solve 5 problems, if you can't solve homelessness and violence and drug addiction, and make all of those experiences or problems lessened within New Bedford, and I think those are all problems that they have. If you wanted to focus on one of them, and then being very specific about then targeting who is the person you're helping. That's often really important to me. Like, am I really trying to target every homeless person? Maybe I'm trying to target homeless teens, and and often it's easy to think about someone who might be your age and what might be their problem. Like, if you were to say homeless teens, you're not that far out of your teen years. You might understand why a teenager might have been homeless, what their real problems that they faced are, what are their actual everyday problems. So trying to narrow the problem and then try to solve for a very specific problem. That might be, and even though you might feel like you're not helping as much as you could in the end or solving a bigger problem, solving one of those problems is a massive challenge on its own.
I have a kind of related question that goes off of that, but that's it. That's a good point to focus on that group. But I was watching, years ago, I watched The West Wing with my parents, and there was an episode where they were talking about this rich guy wanted to donate a lot of money and do something, and in Africa, and he asked what he should do, and the person he was talking to said build roads, because that's an important thing that no one ever wants to do because it's not glamorous, but it's something people need to get things everywhere. And like you were showing us, like building toilets, like no one ever thinks of that because it's not, it's not glamorous, you're never going to be remembered for that, but people need toilets. So that kind of answer, like what do people need that we wouldn't think of necessarily? What would be the most impactful structure, I guess, in your mind? What would something like that be?
I'm not sure I can answer that, but I might pose it back as a question. I think then if you want to know, the better person to ask might be to connect up with people within New Bedford, or maybe it's organizations within New Bedford that might have an actual problem. So if there is, I'm sure, a homeless coalition in New Bedford. There, I'm sure, are drug treatment facilities in New Bedford. I'm sure just the hospitals in New Bedford have issues. The public schools in New Bedford have issues. So if you were to try to connect up with one of those things, one issue that you might want to tackle. I mean, you could go the other way. You could say, like, I want to tackle the recycling program within New Bedford. There is one. What do they need? Is there something that they might need? So you might try to actually connect up with a particular group within the town and find out what they need. And you might find that, I'm totally guessing here, but let's say you wanted to tackle a problem like recycling, which people might not see as a problem, but it's something that you need to promote perhaps, or do something better. And so, you might have, you might then talk to them about a problem they have, and then also start researching successful recycle programs elsewhere. And, to find that, outreach, getting people to understand the benefits of recycling is important. Or maybe it's that getting someone to understand the amount of trash that an average New Bedford resident uses, and you build a memorial to the amount of garbage they produce a year. Like, that's in your face, and that's different, and it's not permanent, but like, you might want to show New Bedford residents how much garbage you generated a year, and what percentage was recycled, and so on and so forth. There's a street in England where they were, in London rather, a side street, and they were trying to, on the sidewalk, people were applying metrics of what people within London were doing, and I think it was for recycling. And so they were showing and painting the sidewalk, this rather street that was a small street that people crossed getting to a subway station, how much people were or weren't doing a year. And, just on people's normal walk to and from work, or someplace, if you want to have an impact, I hope you're also thinking about where you might have an impact, where people are out walking and might engage on a human level, or maybe it's the impact you want someone driving by. So you might think about where people drive, and those are helping you define site. But it might be, in a sculptural way, helping people understand a problem in the scale of it. That's something that might not be a build structure that you inhabit, but it could be as impactful.
This question is for our specific project. We're doing a recyclable greenhouse. We're going to implement it within all schools to act as like an educational tool for the students. And we want to make it out of recycled materials, like out of bottles. This question is just about the structure of it. What's your advice on how it would actually work? Like what type of materials would you have to use for it to, last throughout the winter and all that?
Well, when you're saying bottles, perhaps you mean plastic bottles. Yes. And plastic is really strong in ways that we probably wish it wasn't, and it can withstand a lot of things, because I'm sure you've seen a bottle that hangs around and is outside for a long time, and they have. So I would think about, I've seen a lot of projects built out of a bottle that might already have structural integrity. I've seen projects built out of those squarish bottles that Poland Springs water comes out of. Have you ever seen the type? And they stack up, and the bottle is kind of already square, so you can already imagine the bottle being almost like a brick that you could build with, and that you're not thinking about connecting round things, which round things don't easily want to get together. But maybe you want to think about a bottle shape that immediately helps you. So rectangular, those water bottles. Well, not the, I'm thinking the ones you put in your fridge, or the large commercial size that are, actually, I just saw a wonderful installation an artist did of utilizing those to make light fixtures.
Yeah, that's
So,
what we were thinking too.
I Googled that because I found great images of that. It's sort of a homemade light fixture, and so you can imagine using that bottle. How many different things could you use that bottle for? And that could be the increase of scale of the material. So not just using that material for the side. Those are strong enough. You could imagine using it for the foundation. Pour concrete in it, and it's a mold for concrete. You can, light can get through it, obviously can hold water, it does that, but you could utilize it for light fixtures. You could make signs and stanchions to hold and give your messaging. You know, you could sort of transform with, if you found one module that can be repetitive. Can I ask about maybe another project that someone's working on?
Would you like to talk about your project?
We're thinking about building like vertical gardens up a wall of an old mill, and I guess like little containers would be like people talk about using tin cans. I don't know what's more.
Vertical gardens. There's so many materials that I've seen people build them out of, and I think that from my understanding, I just saw an incredibly beautiful one it's at 10 St. James in Boston. If you want to Google, Liberty Mutual just opened up their building at I think they're 20 St. James. And speaking of, one of the things that if you want to build a building in Boston, you think, I'm wealthy, I have money, I'm a developer, I'm going to build a building. That's not really how it goes. You can buy a piece of land and you can have an architect design something completely permitted, but the city has to approve things. And the city said, you're Liberty Mutual, I'm sure you've all heard of that company. They're a wealthy company. They are a private institution making money. They said, you want to build this building? You're going to trade off. What are you going to give the city? And they gave the city, they wanted to build a parking lot for their senior executives, and they said, no, you're going to build a park, not a parking lot, a park. And it's going to be public. And frankly, public park might have homeless people living in it at night, which is exactly the opposite of what Liberty Mutual wanted. But they were required to build a park. And so they went to the design team to say, help us build a park and help us build a safe park so that people at night feel safe walking through it, and help us build a beautiful park. And help us build a park that is on the north side of our building that really doesn't get beautiful light. And what wants to grow in that? So the team of designers and architects, they built these beautiful, tall, living green walls and used plants that want to grow on the north side of things. So you'll have to think about, start with what you want to grow, because the container should be what's suitable for that plant.
Yeah.
And so if you're growing on the sides of buildings, what you grow on the south side, on the east side, on the west side, you should, when you choose your location, figuring out where you want to put things, and then actually thinking about what direction solar exposure it has, because different plants will want to grow better in different conditions. And so with those solar and green wall installations, there's a lot of different materials. I've seen people build them inside their houses, and they utilize containers that that sort of rewater itself, and that you might be using materials that had a life to something else, and so you're giving them a second life. And maybe it's not tin cans, because that could be a beneficial thing, but also I can imagine water and soil and things not wanting to grow in that, but maybe plastic is the right tool. Or, but you might want to research different wall structures, and what you're going to want to see is the unglamorous part, because you always see the beautiful green walls filled with plants and different items, but then you need to see the guts of it and see how it works. And the other thing, I mean, if you, to push the project to the next level, I would really understand what plants you can grow based on the area, and then thinking about, there's an idea of xeriscaping, which begins with an X, E-R-I, and it's an idea of trying to utilize the least amount of water to for your plants, and so plants that are the best for a particular environment, things that are local, things that are not invasive species that could have other issues, but trying to find stuff that wants to grow here and would utilize, you don't need to bring in artificial light, you don't need to bring in tremendous amount of water or tremendous amounts of fertilizer or things like that. And being that specific and selective about your plants. Because then you can also utilize it as a teaching tool for residents in Bedford who might want green yards and beautiful green spaces in their plots of land, but they could do it without having to waste clean drinking water or pump fertilizers into their soil, which might leach out into the water reserves. Thank you.
Another project? Questions?
What's the most ambitious project that you've heard of that are, so you know what we're trying to do, with the community reinvestment in New Bedford and all that. What do you think is like one of the most ambitious projects aside from, this great idea that was implemented in Africa, something like that?
Well, one of my favorite projects that is really impressive to me as sort of a design problem and a humanistic problem. People are, there's a whole movement now to use containers, shipping containers. And, there's a ton of shipping containers, they're all around, and shipping containers are sort of self-created boxes. It might be something, when you're thinking about structures, you might think about building your projects on or off shipping containers. There's been so much tremendous art installations using them and architecture, and it's just a huge part of design right now, sort of a DIY design element, because shipping containers come in specific sizes and they're small versions. They're already structurally connected. But people have, a group of people designed a shipping container that, I think it was the 30-foot size of shipping container. So that's the standard one you see on a tractor trailer truck driving down the highway. They put a medical clinic inside of it. So in the United States, they built out the shipping container. Because that's the beauty of a shipping container. You can take it all and build it all here, and you can put whatever you need to in it, and in the factory setting, get the equipment and get everything that we have here, and then actually load it up with supplies. So not just the space, but they're all the supplies that are needed. And so the shipping container is sort of packed, and then they ship it, and they drop ship it to a location around the world. And they actually do these in areas that have had natural disasters, because there's something that they could get there. And so they will drop a container, and they'll be able to bring maybe some power and water and waste to that shipping container. And the connections are all pre-made, set up where they build the container, make the connections, and then they can unpack the container and they can have a clinic, a hospital clinic. And then people think about this in a modular way. And modular, I think, is such a key part of this. You can imagine stacking a few of these together, and that one could be, they can make one that's sort of an operating facility. And it may not be what you would see in Mass General Hospital, but the alternatives of building a hospital from scratch and the length of time it would take, this has a huge impact. And they could make modules that are just storage facilities for prescriptions, and then they can utilize a less expensive or a quicker exterior space where they can perhaps see patients of a less clinical nature. So they're utilizing outdoors and indoors, and not all of it's happening inside. That to me is fascinating, and really is, I think, getting to a project which has a bigger message is really, it is so rewarding, and it's, we all say, like, America, we're the best country on earth, and that's sort of statement made. And I also think that if we're going to say that, there's an obligation about giving back. And I think that we are pretty fortunate, you know. You guys all probably left. I'm sure everyone has struggles in life, but we all are a lot more fortunate than some people and what they grew up around. So it's our obligation to try to do something that's a little bit bigger than that. And sometimes that bigger is really just about education. And so, you know, your project might be doing something about education, greenhouses and impacts that students are getting here. And sometimes it's bigger about, you know, medicine is a huge topic, but changes happen in really small ways.